Suncor has officially opened its Fort Hills oil sands project north of Fort McMurray. The project put 7,900 people to work at the peak of construction. It is employing 1,400 people full-time now that the facility is operational. With a production capacity of about 194,000 barrels per day, the government estimates that Fort Hills could generate $8 billion in royalties to the province over the life of the project. Later today, Nexen is expected to announce new investment in Alberta's oil sands at Long Lake, 30 kilometers southeast of Fort McMurray. This is where we bring in Danielle Smith from Global News Radio, 770 CHQR, to continue the conversation on this. Good morning, Danielle.
Good morning.
Well, this all sounds good for Alberta's economy, but could we maybe expect that these two oil sands projects are going to be the last ones?
Well, here's the good news. At least you've got a couple thousand people who are going to have long-term, stable, high-paying jobs. And here's the bad news. Suncor CEO has said, we're not building anymore until we get pipelines built. Now we've got this other problem with Bill C-69, which is currently in the Senate facing the final hurdles before it gets passed. And this is the bill that would overhaul the regulatory process to approve pipelines. The Canadian Energy Pipeline Association has basically said if you wanted to go out of your way to make sure that pipelines would never be built again, then this is the bill that you would write. So it's a terrible bill. And so now we've got this problem where the world continues to be thirsty for oil. The new report suggests we're not going to see the peak of oil demand probably until somewhere around 2042. Canada is an ethical, environmental, excellent provider of this product, and yet we're going to have to continue to keep our production contained because we just don't have any way to get it to market. It's just not practical to think that any new production would be able to come on stream and be transported by rail, even though we're at the highest levels of oil by rail transport. We need pipelines built. So we're going to talk with Tim Pickering today and find out whether or not this kind of squeeze ends up changing minds of politicians that'll move these projects forward, or if we're in a period where we're just going to have to start managing the decline.
Yeah, we saw Premier Notley up in Fort McMurray as well, and she said she's mad. She's angry about the whole thing, but when can we expect a new timeline?
Well, this is the case, is that not only do we not have a clear timeline on Trans Mountain, and people who are working inside the company are holding out thinking they're not going to see anything until potentially even after the next election. I know Rachel Notley wants to move it faster, but I don't think that the Trudeau government is in any hurry. They sure don't seem to be. And now we see a similar action across the border in the United States with Indigenous groups challenging the Keystone Pipeline on a similar basis to what Trans Mountain was challenged on. So our two best hopes to get our product moved look like they're both facing incredible hurdles, and I think a lot of questions about whether or not they're going to be built. So it's a good news story today. The other thing to keep in mind is that the Fort Hills plant began in 2002. Construction, 16 years to be able to get it to a point where it's in production. That's why you need to have a positive investment climate that attracts investor dollars, because there's a massive lag time between dollars announced and spent today and when the production comes online. If we are now at a point where everything's stalled, nobody's willing to get moving, we might not see another one of these announcements for 20 years. And so I think maybe we should celebrate that today, but I'll also really realize we've got to get moving on pipelines.
And that conversation will continue on your show this morning. I know that's starting at 9:30 today. Thanks, Danielle.
Yeah, my pleasure.